Whoa. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for this lecture on the Film Festival Industrial Complex, presented by Aaron Zeghers, the visiting artist of the 28th Artifact Film Festival. Artifact takes place over the next 3 days, 7 p.m. nightly at Festival Hall, where we'll be projecting Super 8 and 16 millimeter prints. I highly recommend you come check it out. Our festival, and Aaron as well, was originally supposed to happen in 2020. Obviously, that did not take place. So we're really happy to have Aaron back and have the festival back after 3 years off. And it will be especially interesting today to think about film festivals in terms of labor and economy after coming out of the pandemic. I think this topic is especially important to talk about as we as film festival employees are in the best position to critique the film festival. Hi everyone.
Oops, sorry.
Thank you so much for joining us today for this lecture.
Oh, sorry, 1 second, 1 second. There's this. There we go.
Aaron Zeghers, the visiting artist of the 28th.
We got it. Okay, go for it. Typical. There has to be some kind of stream
Has to
issue.
be
My
some.
students, if they're watching, are going to be like, oh, we messed up. 10 points.
But yeah, I was saying, like, as film festival employees, we are in the best position to critique the industry, but at the same time, we risk our livelihood to do so. So it's really valuable to be able to talk about this stuff with you in terms of like academics and audiences of film festivals, so we can speak openly about these critiques and think about how we can improve the film festival industry. Aaron is uniquely qualified to give this lecture as he has been on all sides of film festivals as audience, artist, worker, and leader. Very important roles and gives you a very good perspective to speak on. Aaron is a Canadian filmmaker based in rural Manitoba, and Aaron works primarily as an experimental and nonfiction filmmaker, utilizing found footage, images and histories, analog formats, and obsolete technologies. His form-bending documentaries and expanded cinema performances blend the formally experimental with the intimately personal. Zeghers' films have screened at festivals and venues around the world, including the International Film Festival Rotterdam, Sheffield Doc Fest, Vancouver, Ann Arbor Film Festival, Doxa Film Festival, and New York's Mono Nowhere. Zeghers has also toured widely with his work, performing his expanded cinema work in Rotterdam, New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, Vancouver, and Toronto, and more. As a film programmer, Zeghers is the founder of the Winnipeg Underground Film Festival and the former festival director for the Gimli Film Festival, Manitoba's largest film festival. So with that, I'd like to welcome Aaron Zeghers to give us his lecture, The Film Festival Industrial Complex.
Maybe give it another check. Okay, thanks for that warm introduction, Katie, and thanks everyone from Artifact and everyone who came out in person in the room today. A couple people here in the room, hopefully some folks online. I'm just going to check and make sure we're looking good here. Yeah, thanks everyone for joining us online. Should have hired CBC, ha 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 ha. Yes, okay, so let me just get prepared to get started here. So there's just some housekeeping stuff off the top. One moment, please. Okay, here we go. Just to begin with, we want to make a land acknowledgement, of course. I'd like to acknowledge that we are on Treaty 7 territory here in a pleasure to be in Calgary. The traditional territories of the Blackfoot Nations, including the Siksika, Piikani, Kainai, and Tsuut'ina Nation, and the Stoney Nakoda First Nations. We acknowledge all the many First Nations, Métis and Inuit, whose footsteps have marked these lands since time immemorial. I hope that today's talk can be one that's centered around the continued influence that colonial capitalism has on our society, in particular the arts sector. I hope this will, in some small way, raise about ideas and a public consciousness in the microcosm of the film festival world that will help us to continue to address these historic harms and inequities, as well as very modern and contemporary harms and inequities, of course, as we're seeing every day. So Me, a little bit about me. I'm Aaron Zeghers, as Katie mentioned. I'm a filmmaker, film programmer, arts administrator, and now a newly minted college educator living in Treaty 1 territory in Winnipeg, Manitoba. I lived in Manitoba my entire life and descendant of European immigrants who settled here in the 1800s, working primarily as farmers in rural Manitoba. As a filmmaker, I've been making experimental and nonfiction films since around 2008. A large body of my work are analog films, expanded cinema performances, both of which I'll be exhibiting on Saturday as part of Artifacts. So come out to the festival hall, y'all, and see a couple, up to 5 projector performances, as well as a number of single channel Super 8 and 16mm films I'll be presenting. I've worked as the director of the Gimli Film Festival from 2017 to 2021, and before that was their senior film programmer since 2013. I also co-founded the Winnipeg Underground Film Festival starting in 2013, which I'm so excited to still be involved with as a humble volunteer. And it's going into its 10th annual festival this year, June 1st to 4th in Winnipeg. I'm currently an instructor at RSC Polytech as part of the digital film and media production program. So disclaimer, I want to acknowledge that the opinions I'm sharing here today are my own and not necessarily shared by the Artifact Film Festival or my past or present employers, the festivals who shall not be named, even though I guess I named them already. The critique shared here today is one of neoliberal systems of power and hierarchy, and not necessarily a critique of any individuals. Well, maybe a few, we'll get into that. But keep in mind, I myself have been a board member, a festival manager, a film programmer, a filmmaker, an arts worker in almost every capacity of the film festival sector. So my goal here today is not to demonize individuals, but to make a critique of the capitalist influences at play in the film festival sector, a critique rooted in anti-capitalism, Marxism, whatever you want to call it. Lastly, I also want to acknowledge that since my perspectives are my own, there may be those who disagree, or I may personally have blind spots due to my lived experience as a white male of settler ancestry. I acknowledge my privilege in these matters and encourage healthy, open, respectful debate on all of the thoughts and matters we'll talk about today. I think it's important to remember that there are some very convoluted and controversial matters, hypothetically, and we're not going to all hold the same issues. There's no one way to run a film festival. And so once again, I wanted to encourage respectful and measured debate, whether in person or online, and state now that we'll have no tolerance for aggressive, passive-aggressive, or angry behavior, microaggressions, or any other disrespectful or disruptive conduct. All right, with all of that, oh, sorry, I missed that slide, but anyways, you got the picture of that, there it is. You can also check out the description if you want to download the presentation, PDF presentation today, you can check that out, the link in the online event description here. So what is an industrial complex? Let's get into it. Okay, why am I calling this talk the Film Festival Industrial Complex? Isn't that a little much? Let's talk about what's an industrial complex. Okay, an industrial complex can be defined as a socioeconomic concept wherein businesses become entwined in a social or political system or institution, creating and bolstering a profit economy from these systems. Okay, and the notion of profit economy is going to be very important to what we're kind of talking about here today, so remember that term. Such a complex is said to pursue its own financial interests regardless of, and often at the expense of, the best interests of society and individuals. Okay, so once again, this self-perpetuating kind of interest of industrial complex, superseding the best interests of society or individuals. Businesses within an industrial complex may have been created to advance a social or political goal, but mostly profit when that goal is not reached. Okay, oh, sorry everyone, I realize I'm not sharing my PowerPoint. So sorry folks online, I swear it'll be up there for the rest of the time here. Okay. Businesses with an industrial complex may have been created to advance a social or political goal, but mostly profit when the goal is not reached. The industrial complex may profit financially from maintaining socially detrimental or inefficient systems. Okay, so there's some definitions of that, but let's talk about examples. Anyone in the room here or anyone online, I'll try to monitor this too, it's a little bit difficult, but any ideas of examples of an industrial complex? What's the most famous example of an industrial complex? Anyone? Shout it out. Military industrial complex. Ding, ding, ding. Yes. Okay. So The military-industrial complex, this was coined by President and five-star General Dwight D. Eisenhower in his farewell address as U.S. President in 1961. He said, I quote, in this kind of famous speech that keeps on coming up, especially with the incredible militarization currently of our world. We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. I'm doing my Dwight D. Eisenhower voice. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. So you can watch that video about that speech. This is coming on the heels of World War II. A massive military machine has been built in America, and this is a general talking. This is someone who saw this military-industrial complex being built and how it could actually work against the best interests of society, as we kind of talked about in the thing. So the military-industrial complex is an expression, describes the relationship between the country's close links amongst defense contractors, so companies, military and politicians, who often work together to influence public policy in ways that don't necessarily benefit citizens, i.e. the mass proliferation of the American military. While the military in theory exists to maintain peace and stability, many believe the military-industrial complex does not pursue those actual goals. It's a proponent of continual war, since this is the only way for this complex to grow and its profits. Okay, and thanks everyone for chiming in the chat. Keep it up. So military-industrial complex. Another famous one is, of course, the prison-industrial complex. You know, we've seen, I'm not going to get too in the weeds about that, but a very similar kind of concept as the military-industrial complex. You know, we've seen a quadrupling of the size of the incarcerated population in the United States of America since the 1980s. Okay, so this kind of massive proliferation of this kind of for-profit system that is, some people would argue, is serving itself. Now, one of the things I do want to mention here is, you know, compared to the military-industrial complex, compared to the prison-industrial complex, you know, the gravitas of the film festival industrial complex maybe isn't quite the same, okay? You know, these other industrial complexes, these are some incredibly horrifying and destructive forces in our society. So I'm not trying to say the film festival world is just as awful or terrible or something like that as these others, are kind of on this same plateau. But what I am trying to draw the comparison to is the kind of systems of power and hierarchies, and really the systems of exploitation, inherent exploitation that exist within, that mirror this in a much smaller and a way, if that makes sense. So I just want to be kind of clear about that. But let's talk about, you know, once again, just to recap, industrial complex, a profit economy takes over, okay? And we're going to talk a lot about the profit economy. Capitalist forces become entwined in a system, creating or bolstering a profit economy in these systems, often through cronyism. Okay, there's an abandonment of guiding principles. So participants of an industrial complex may have been created to advance a certain greater altruistic goal, but wind up prioritizing profit, growth, and expansion over their original goals. There's the exploitation of society or individuals. The complex pursues its own financial interests, often at the expense of society and individuals, and often by maintaining socially detrimental systems through a rigid hierarchical system. Okay, and then finally, which is where we're going to start our talk today in terms of analyzing the film festival industrial complex, is accelerated proliferation. In an industrial complex, we'll see an accelerated proliferation of that industry take place. This is due to the self-fulfilling nature of an industrial complex, which promotes its own profit-driven growth and expansion above all else. Yes, 100% a pyramid scheme, basically. And you can see this graphic that I kind of adapted from a previously existing graphic that kind of represents kind of the pyramid of film festivals with, you know, take this with a grain of salt as well. It's a little tongue-in-cheek, this graphic poster I created for the event. So let's talk about film festival proliferation as a gateway into the, into building our case for a legitimate, that the film festival industrial complex is a legitimate term. It is a useful term, okay? Back in 2013, writer Stephen Follows published a 3-part comprehensive study of film festivals in existence at that time. It's an incredible series of articles. I highly encourage you to check it out. The link is in the PDF here. The study utilized publicly available information on sites like Without a Box and a bunch of other platforms, IMDb, to compile a list of almost 10,000 film festivals that had been active at least once in the past 15 years. Okay, so a lot of those were defunct, but at least some of the major findings according to this study, which I highly recommend checking out, there were around 3,000 film festivals currently active at that time that Follows found. Okay, as we said, about 10,000 that he found just that it had existed in the past 15 years. 75% of all these film festivals were created in the past 10 years. That would have been from 2003 to 2013. 75% of those 10,000 film festivals were created during that time, according to his study. 40% of film festivals only ever ran once. Something we'll talk about eventually, but I think is a really interesting and kind of prescient piece of information, considering kind of, I guess, where we're going to wind up in this conversation. And North America, he found, hosts 70% of the world's film festivals, which is the one fact I think might have been potentially a little bit misleading at that time. We'll look at that as well. So here's some graphs. I'm not going to, or some visual information. 3/4 of film festivals based in North America, according to this study, and some other countries. Life expectancy of film festivals, but really what I'm interested in terms of, we're talking about proliferation, is birth year of film festivals, and we say right around 2003. These numbers really start to take off in terms of new festivals being founded and started, okay? And so this is part of me building the case for an industrial complex. We're seeing that this isn't just random. There's an economy behind this. Especially, with the United States of America being one of the most per capita, having the second most in the entire world film festivals, if there's not an economy for the creation of these film festivals, if there's not a way for them to rent a venue, pay their bills, survive, to a certain respect, then these film festivals are not going to happen. Okay, that's my argument here that we'll get into, is that the proliferation of organizations, events, and institutions that take place under neoliberal capitalism, they can't take place under neoliberal capitalism without an underlying economic conditions that support this proliferation, especially in the USA, which has very little public support, in lots of regions, and lots of countries in the world have very little public support for film festivals. Okay, so there has to be a way, an economy there.
By public support, you mean like government funding?
Government funding, yeah.
Not like people.
Yeah, exactly, right. So we'll get into we're going places here. But yes, public funding, I do mean government support. Canada, we're very, very privileged to have some pretty good levels of public support for our arts institutions and film festivals. Okay, but it's not like that everywhere in the world. However, during this time, Follows also found in 2012, for whatever reason, there's a strong decline in the growth of festivals. I do wonder if that was just because he did the survey in 2013, and so a lot of the festivals that started that year weren't as visible through some of these ways. But let's skip to 2023 to some research that I've done in the past month or so, and take a look at how this has changed since 2013. Okay, so my first-hand research is completed in March 2023 and uses Film Free as a sole source to try to capture a quick overview of film festival stats. Okay, so we can't consider this exhaustive. I just personally don't even have the means right now, or in the past 3 weeks, to try to figure out every single film festival that's active in the world. But Film Freeway, being such a leader now and such a kind of ubiquitous force in terms of film festival submissions, a great place to put together kind of a quick overview. Okay, so we do need to acknowledge this is not exhaustive, but it is interesting. Okay, so key stats, there's over 11,000 film festivals currently on Film Freeway, okay? And actually, since I did this a week ago, the number has increased by 56 as of last night. It's probably higher now. It's kind of incredible. And just so you know my methodology here, I'm filtering on the right-hand side here, you'll see I'm filtering by film festivals, okay? So I'm not looking at all the other crap. It's on Film Free. I mean, I kind of consider it crap, or like fluff, whatever. Maybe you do too. I don't know. But I'm looking just for whatever is classified as film festival. Now, we all know there's lots of other stuff on there. But what I also did was filtered by festivals that had a date set after April 1st, 2022. Okay, so this is in the past year or a date set in the future, and that's really the closest I could get to determine what festivals might be active on Film Freeway. Okay, so that means they had a festival in the past year or they have one scheduled for the future. Okay, so that's what I'm considering active film festivals for on Film Freeway right now. 7,000. Okay, that's up from 3,000 when Follows did his study. Just under 50% of film festivals are in North America, so that's down from Follow's study, and we'll talk about that. And Canada has 536 film festivals on Film Freeway, comes in third for the country for most film festivals per capita, if you exclude countries with really, really, really low populations in one festival, etc. So I did have to do some there, but generally has really high per capita film festivals. So here's some info. I'm going to breeze through these because I'm trying to stay on time decently enough here. But this is film festivals by geographic region. Okay, so North America here in the blue, Europe being a third, North America almost a half, Europe almost a third, the rest of the world in terms of film festivals, at least on Film Freeway. Remember, all this information is just based on Film Freeway, less than a quarter from the rest of the world. However, if we look compared to 2013, we're seeing a significant decline in the overall festivals from North America and a significant increase in festivals from Europe and a marginal increase in festivals from every other nation. That's why, I mean, I do think that probably globally, other regions have obviously been maybe catching up to North America, but I also do wonder about the methodology around Follow's research, if North America was maybe for some reason overrepresented in that 2013 study, because I do find it hard to believe in 2013 that almost 70% of festivals were based in North America. You know, Europe does have quite a few film festivals, and anyways. So here we have by country, United States making up a huge swath of all of them, followed by United Kingdom, Italy, and Canada, and then a bunch of other countries, India, Australia, Spain, France, Germany, Mexico, Brazil, Russian Federation, and on. Okay, and once again, comparatively, the overall percentage of the United States has gone way down. Canada has gone down marginally. A number of other countries have gone up. So I do wonder if some of these European festivals were just not found for whatever reason as part of Follow's study, or if they've really increased by that much in the last 10 years. Fest per 100K population. Once again, you see Canada at third here. Cyprus, number one. Didn't see that one coming. Anyway, yeah, I had no idea. I'm going to have to apply to some Cyprus film festivals now. I'm very curious about this. But anyways, this is kind of festivals per 100,000 population and a bunch of other facts. Okay, Film Freeway by focus. You know, what festivals have what focus, what festivals are what category. We're seeing mostly short film festivals, which is interesting, or that's the highest number. And then we have facts by province. Ontario, half of all film festivals in Canada, pretty much. Very interesting. And fest per 100K with two festivals. Yukon gets the highest per capita film festivals. Two festivals that I'm aware of. Maybe there's more. I mean, at least on Film Freeway. Okay. And major cities, la 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 la. But here's what I'm really interested in. This is total. You know, here we have. So the growth of total number of festivals. I mean, there's reasons I think that doesn't showing the huge amount of growth that we're kind of looking for to find this proliferation. Mostly because I'm just looking at festivals that are on Film Freeway. Follows looked at literally every festival he could find on the internet. But still, there's more film festivals on Film Freeway now, since 2014 when they were founded, than he could find at the internet of all time, basically. But what's really interesting, I think, is the active festivals. We're seeing over a doubling of number of active film festivals, and that's just festivals that appear to be active on Film Freeway, not the scores of film festivals that aren't, like the Winnipeg Underground Film Festival, not on Film Freeway. Okay, so I'm going to breeze through this part a little bit. You can look at this. This is me kind of just like trying to figure out what factor of multiplication have we gone through in terms of number of film festivals since 2020. My finding leads me to believe about a minimum of a 3 times, more likely a 5 to 7 times proliferation of the number of film festivals since 2020 or since 2000, in Canada. Okay, and so all of this leads me to believe that, as well as just kind of my own kind of lived experience, that has been a proliferation of whatever the scale was. There has been a proliferation of film festivals globally, and I guess the real question for that is what influences could have led to such a proliferation during this time. And let's think, early 2000s into the 2010s. Any ideas for what has happened during that time that could have led to such a mass proliferation of festivals? Let's think around 2000. What happened around the year 2000? Yes, we have in the classroom here, ding, 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 the adoption of the internet. Okay, so this made it easier to share work, period. Okay, it also helped in event promotion in a certain way, finding an audience, marketing events, connecting with people that have similar interests. That was a big thing about it. And then one second here. And then there's also the advent of digital cinematography. Okay. 9/11 says Clint ends. No, I mean maybe there's a lot of very interesting films released around that time. Loose Change. I know you're a big fan, Clint. Advent of digital cinematography. Also, it made it easier and cheaper to make films for indie filmmakers. And I don't have stats on this, but I do believe, and I could probably find stats that the number of filmmakers, because of digital cinematography and because of access to equipment, increased significantly during this kind of time frame. From the first, obviously digital cameras became widely available before that, but really the whole digital filmmaking and exhibition system, went from film to digital during this time span. Okay, so burning a DVD in the early days made it way more easy and affordable to do indie distribution. Can you imagine having to strike a film print to send it to TIFF or wherever to have them be able to preview your film? It would have cost hundreds or thousands of dollars to make a couple prints so you could actually be able to show people these films. I wouldn't be surprised if back in the day people just kind of were like, yeah, we'll play that film, and hadn't even seen it. Scott Fitzpatrick also puts in Vimeo, founded in 2004. Absolutely, that was a huge creative kind of networking hub for experimental, artistic media artists. It's really strayed away from that now. The profit economy is real. And more people started making films, and thus more people were interested in starting film festivals. Okay, I once again, I don't have data to back this up, but this is kind of my assumptions. I know I started a film festival because I was a filmmaker and I wanted to see experimental cinema be screened in my hometown more often, and so did my friends that started it. We were all filmmakers. So I think these are some of the reasons. And Mike Holbloom's chiming in here. Large fests did and still show movies without seeing them first, sometimes as a part of package deals. 100%, yes. However, my argument here is that a far more powerful force would use both the internet and droves of new filmmakers to provide an exploitative economic foundation that underpins the entire film festival industrial complex. Okay? And what is that? The rise of digital submissions and the financial exploitation of filmmakers. Okay? And so we're going to talk a little bit about Without a Box. Does anyone in the room remember Without a Box? Woo! Man, making me nostalgic. Without a Box was a website founded in 2000, believe it or not, which allowed independent filmmakers to self-distribute their films. It was the first widely known film festival submission site and quickly became a dominant player. In 2008, Without a Box was bought out by IMDb, which is in turn a subsidiary of Amazon. Boo! Boo. Okay, we're going to get some boos in there. If you're at home, please follow along with the boos. And remember, point number one: a profit economy takes over. Okay, certainly isn't the first time a profit economy entered the realm of the film festival, but it is a pretty interesting and I think marked point when literal Amazon bought out this first kind of most kind of all-encompassing film submission platform. Okay, and people hated Without a Box. People still hate. You know, people are in the chat being boo. People hated Without a Box. Stephen Follows, in his research study in 2013 that I referenced earlier, did a survey of over 500, got over 500 responses from people managing film festivals, and it is unanimous. They hated Without a Box, and I hated Without a Box. Okay, it was the worst. It was difficult and time-consuming to set up. You had to just fill in forms over and over and over and over and over for every festival you wanted to submit. Terrible, unintuitive design. For filmmakers, this was the hugest pet peeve and why I refused to use it and would email film festivals and say, I'm sending you a DVD, is it forced filmmakers to pay to submit to the festival, but it also forced them to pay to upload their film to the Without a Box platform, and instead of using a simple Vimeo or a YouTube link. Okay, you literally had to pay multiple times. It was never developed and updated after Amazon bought it. You know, not never, but barely. I went on the Wayback Machine on archive.org, which is an incredible resource, allows you to go back in time on the internet, and went back and looked at Without a Box from late 2014 till when it went out of business in 2019. They didn't update this graphic that you see here once. 5 years, and they didn't update their homepage. It just goes to show you, Amazon was trying to milk, as good capitalists do, every penny out of this platform, and maybe they also realized it really didn't have a future or didn't prioritize it for whatever reason. They took a huge cut, ranging from 15 to 50% of total submission fees paid. Tough for me to find that information now, but this is kind of offhand some comments and stuff from Stephen Follows' research with festivals. And yet, festivals use this platform in droves. Nearly half of the festivals that Follows interviews or hears from in 2013 used this platform. And why? I mean, it's not complicated. It was one of the easiest ways to generate significant funding for very young and very established festivals alike. This wasn't a new method. You know, submission fees were very commonplace at film festivals prior to Without a Box. It just made it easier to get more submissions and with less admin. Okay, you're not receiving checks, opening the mail, depositing it. It all happens for you. Okay, passive income, in other words. Okay, and here's a list of the Without a Box partners, I believe from around 2014 or 15. Some of the biggest film festivals in the world listed here, including the Festival of Festivals, Toronto International Film Festival. We'll get to them. So if we look at the heyday, of Without a Box, 2003 to 2013 or thereabouts, we really see this correspond with this proliferation in film festivals according to Follows' study, okay? Or at least that's kind of, I am really trying to draw this correlation that between these things. And why would that be? Well, if you're a small film festival, you have 300 submissions, $20 per submission, that's $6,000. Okay, Winnipeg Underground Film Festival, my beloved Winnipeg Underground Film Festival, 10 years coming up. For probably 5-6 years, this is pretty much the max budget we ever had. We would get one grant a year from the Manitoba Arts Council if we didn't mess up and miss the deadline. Oh God. And that would be the entire budget for running the film festival. And we didn't charge submission fees to submit, and we paid all filmmakers screening fees with that $6,000. So yes, it's absolutely possible to run a film festival today on something like $6,000. It means you're using DIY spaces, you're looking for in-kind partners to help you facilitate this. It's a DIY event, but it's 100% possible, and I know that's what a lot of small first-year, second-year, third-year festivals are doing out there, is using submission fees to kind of get off the ground. Okay, and so I'm not necessarily trying to denigrate them, but I am trying to make the case that this starts these festivals on a foundation that is, in a way, exploitative of filmmakers. Especially when we think back on point number 2, this idea of guiding principles. We'll talk about later about, well, if our guiding principle is supporting filmmakers, increasing, marginalized voices, this is a barrier, Okay, so we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But so there we go, 300 submissions. I don't know if WUF ever got 300 submissions. I think even in our first year, we probably got more than 300 submissions. So 300 submissions on Film Freeway, especially if you live in a major city, you're like, ooh, like a Seattle film, that must be, and it's like a first year event, you don't really notice or whatever. If you have good graphic design, you're marketing it, you can easily get that many submissions on Film Freeway as a first year event, okay? But let's look at a medium festival, okay? So let's say you get 1,000 submissions, and this is generally around ballpark range, 800 to 1,200, I think was the max what WUF has been getting for a number of years, okay? So this is, for a medium festival, it's been running a couple of years, put some effort into marketing and promotion. This is totally not outside of the realm of possibility. $30 may be a little bit steep. I think it depends, but certainly not outrageous. That's netting you $30,000. So now we're starting to get into real money. This is someone's salary for a year, for some people. And so once again, this isn't to diminish film festival staff. It's an incredible labor of love that a lot of these festivals go through, usually completely volunteer run for years. WUF has basically always been volunteer run. And so all of these tasks are happening at these, especially small and sometimes medium-sized festivals. Everything from graphic design, promotion, film selection, grant writing, dealing with sponsors or funders, setting up a film freeway. This is all often volunteer labor. Okay, and so that's something to acknowledge here. Is that I think the whole. It's just another part of the exploitative foundation of film festivals is a lot of these organizations are completely run on volunteer labor, okay? And that's also an issue, just the same as not paying filmmakers or expecting filmmakers to foot the bill for a festival is. Let's go to a large festival. 3,000 submissions at $50 per submission is 150 grand, okay? So here's where people are really starting to be able to build a large and impressive event, being able to pay a number of staff to actually run that event. This is serious labor, this is serious work, and so once again, I'm not trying to demonize people for being able to pay their staff well, but that's a shit ton of money coming from the pockets of filmmakers, and mostly from the filmmakers who don't play at that festival. If 3,000 people submit to a festival, what percentage of that money is coming from rejection? Okay, there's a great Naz Dinsel quote about that coming up. Okay, and Leslie Raymond, I see you in the chat asking some questions. 61 this year, you also use Without a Box. How do you pay yourself at 6K? Exactly, you can't. That's the thing. How do you pay filmmakers at 6K? That was the decision that WUF made. We decided we were doing this as a volunteer labor, and that we were making a priority to pay the filmmakers first. Just in the past year or two, we've been able to offer honorariums to our festival director, lead programmer, but it's still nowhere near actual salary. And this is interesting because we're going to talk about Ann Arbor Film Festival here. So thanks for joining us, Leslie. I love Ann Arbor Film Festival. It is a great, righteous festival that has been doing their best, as we will talk about, to engage in this exact conversation that we are having today. So thanks for joining, Leslie, and thanks for all the hard work you do. I know it's not easy. So Ann Arbor Film Festival, on their Film Freeway, they list over 3,000 submissions annually at $30 to $70 range. And we know, actually, from their IRS Form 990 available publicly on the internet, that they took in about, in 2020, I believe it was, $132,000 of submission fees, right? That's a lot of cabbage, right? And that's not to shame anyone at Ann Arbor Film Festival. This is publicly available facts, and what's really encouraging about this as well is that, as we'll talk about later, Ann Arbor has started to pay honorariums to filmmakers at their festival. But it does go to show you that there is big money in submission fees, okay? Especially at bigger festivals, especially festivals that people want to play. And one of those is Toronto International Film Festival. Boo, boo. Just kidding, kind of. Okay, so let's look at Toronto International Film Festival. Perhaps, I would say, easily the most exploitative film festival in Canada, okay? The only major film festival that I know, the only really top tier festival now, all of a sudden in the past couple of years, that is refusing to pay filmmakers a dime, despite the fact they're getting between $4 million to $12 million of public money, tax dollars, every year. Okay, we're going to look at their financials later. Okay. Yeah, and thank you. Leslie says, proud of high submission rates and full transparency. Transparency, I mean, that almost makes me cry. I'm not even kidding. Transparency is so important. If you're a festival manager out there, you're listening, there's one of the best things you can do, I think, to further this conversation is be transparent about finances, about your policies, screening fee policies, submission policies, etc. So Toronto International Film Festival, 7,900 submissions. This is probably way out of date. I bet there's way more. And it follows, actually, so the same guy that did that other study did an amazing article. The source is listed here. Oops. On just TIFF, a separate article. And in that one, he found in 2016, there was 6,900 submissions at TIFF. 7,900, this is the latest kind of figure I could find. But I really do believe there is more submissions now, but we'll just go with that number, okay? And so here we're seeing with the range of $35 to $135 submission fees, TIFF is seeing somewhere in the range, it's probably not at the beginning, it's probably not at the end, but somewhere in the range of $250,000 to $1 million of revenue from submission fees.
These like very, very top end, those high-end festivals, like would they blur as part of like the mainstream industrial film complex as well?
I mean, yeah, for sure. Like the question was, do these top end festivals kind of blur as part of essentially Hollywood or like mainstream film industry? And 100%. You can look up. I mean, I love browsing TIFF photos on the internet, and it's like Steven Spielberg and like all of these huge celebrities are going to TIFF, right? But I mean, and this is a whole basket of worms. But if a festival is that huge, why can't you afford $30,000 to pay your short filmmakers? Literally, like I haven't done. Well, actually, I think I did do the math at one point on the an actual breakdown of how much it would cost to pay all the short filmmakers at TIFF, and I'm pretty sure it was literally around $20,000 to $30,000, which is kind of incredible. Yep. Props to Wavelengths for having no entry fee. Scott is on here, but I will. Okay, so this is crazy. It's back to being free. It wasn't free for a year or two. They started making people pay to submit to Wavelengths even. And I was like, I remember talking to one of the the assistant programmers of Wavelengths. I was like, what? Are you kidding? Yeah, blah, blah, blah. But I saw, that all of a sudden now on their Film Freeway, it is free to submit. Those, I don't know why the experimental filmmakers get a break. It must be the Michael Snow connection or something. They're just like, And I see the question from Sarah in the chat. How can we pay everyone, filmmakers and festival workers? I mean, that is the bane of our existence. Okay, it really is. And like I said, I don't have the perfect answers, but this is part of the conversation that I think is important. Is working towards ways of more sustainable operations. Yeah, and ultimately to abolish capitalism, and it would be probably, honestly, one of the best ways. And Scott Fitzpatrick also says, well, Wavelengths is free. It means they're not watching any of the submissions, or probably a lot of them, but which is maybe, I don't know. I'm not going to speculate, but we do get into that. But let's also look at Sundance. Okay, 15,000 submissions. 15,000 submissions. My God. Okay, and this is something that they literally list publicly as well. 15,000 submissions. That's incredible and kind of horrifying, in a way. So $45 to $115, a little bit higher low end, a little bit lower high end than TIFF, but very equatable. So we're looking at over $500,000 minimum, possibly closer to $1.5 million of submission fees every year at Sundance. This is all just kind of, simple conjecture based on these things. I don't have not every film festival is as transparent as Ann Arbor Film Festival. They roll all their kind of budgetary lines into various different things. And a lot of huge organizations, someone like TIFF who's running a kids film festival, TIFF Film Circuit, theater, regular film festival, there's a lot of stuff going on there. It's hard to pick it apart. So start to get the sense of the incredible amount of wealth and resources that some of these top level film festivals have, and simultaneously these are the festivals most refusing to pay submission fees. A film festival like Artifact, has always historically paid IMA rates. With everything going on, had to have a little bit of convo about that this year. But happy to say that is still the priority, and that is still the case here at Artifact, as well as most other tiny festivals across Canada. Some of the smaller ones in the States are offering honorariums. It's the biggest ones that decide the rules don't apply to them. Okay, in particular, TIFF. So much public funding, so much resources, and such a little amount of money comparatively that would be required to do the right thing and pay a minimum, artist fee to all filmmakers equitably. Okay, and we'll talk about all that. But I want to get into the rise of Film Freeway, right? Because which I'm going to argue is a wolf in sheep's clothing, because it was much to the relief of filmmakers and festival admin that Film Freeway was launched in 2014. It was a Canadian-made solution to the horrors of Without a Box. It offered great user interface and streamlined the incessant form-filling bureaucratic hell that filmmakers are constantly put through by funders, by film festivals, etc. They also took a modest cut of submission fees. Okay, it's uncertain exactly what point to start, but my research indicates they recently increased their fees from 6% to 7%. Okay, and this brings up a little Mike Holbloom quote. Thanks for joining us today, Mike. This is, I think, literally just an email to me, but what will they say about us when we are all dust and gone? Oh, they sure filled out a lot of forms. Okay, and the form fatigue on Without a Box was real. It was filling out all this info over and over and over again every film festival, and Film Freeway really solved that. You put your film up once, you enter the information, and then you click at the click of the button, submit to this festival, this one. All you got to do is pull out your credit card, right, and pay those submission fees. Submit. In 2019, Without a Box officially shut down, and people rejoiced. I rejoiced. I remember the day. It was as happy as the day Michael Jackson died. I don't know. The Canadian underdog Film Freeway has somehow beat out Amazon. An incredible feat. However, I will argue here that Film Freeway has actually exacerbated the exploitation of filmmakers to fund film festivals and has helped to form an exploitative foundation for the film festival industrial complex. The takeover of Film Freeway has led to the following outcomes based on how their platform operates. Okay, it has become easier than ever for a no-name first-year festival to put up a Film Freeway and fund their entire operation for that first year, second year, third year, just on submission fees, okay? And unlike other funders and sponsors, there's no accountability for that money. There's no funder that says, oh, well, you have to do this, or this funding's earmarked for this, or a sponsor that says, I want to sponsor this award or this event. Any festival can do anything they want to do with that money, including not even spend it on the event at all, if they wanted to. This surplus of festivals on Film Freeway has made it more and more difficult for emerging filmmakers especially to navigate this system. It preys on the inexperienced and disenfranchised. Okay, it preys on people that are struggling as filmmakers, who are desperate to find a festival to screen their work, and end up falling into some scams, which we'll get into. Film Freeway search natively shows up festivals with deadlines coming up next, which has actually really changed the way that deadlines and submission fees work. Okay, to get the most visibility on Film Freeway, festivals create a tiered submission process, starting with early bird, then regular, then late deadlines, with rapidly escalating fees. Okay, so sometimes the early bird fee or the late fee will be 2 or 3 times the price of the early bird fee. And this trend for tiered and increasing fees was not common before digital submissions. Okay, there was just a deadline and a fee, but now we've seen this kind of through the way that the Film Freeway algorithm promotes festivals based on their next deadline. If they have multiple deadlines, they get way more visibility and thus way more submissions. Okay, so this brings up the amazing Nasdaq Sell quote, submission money funds festivals, which means that rejection funds festivals. And this is just another kind of, I think, nail in the coffin to make the argument that submission fees are the basis of an exploitative kind of practice in that underlies almost all film festivals. Okay, regardless of how great the intentions are, regardless how amazing and righteous the festival is, nearly all festivals require submission fees these days. So that's the exploitation of society and individuals. We talked about that. But we also want to talk about how it's commonplace knowledge, and this is already in the chat with people. A lot of film festivals simply don't really watch the films that are submitted. It's depressing, especially for feature films, okay? Especially kind of mid-level international film festivals, the festival that shall not be named. I'm not going to name that I work for, but or other festivals, kind of at that level who are playing a lot of feature films. They don't program feature films, especially from their open call. They will. The films they program are found through research and recruitment and are invited to participate or offered waivers to submit. And so if you're running a film festival and you have an open call for feature films especially, and you're not really seriously considering, or even if you watch 5 seconds of each one and then you decide, no, these are garbage, we're not going to play them. I think that, ethically, if you're running a film festival, you should be beholden to program from that open call, at least something, at least a couple of things. Otherwise, don't do that open call. That would be my suggestion. That was what we eventually realized at a festival that shall not be named that I work for, that we needed to say either we're programming some stuff from this or we're going to stop doing it. It became basically what we decided on there. Scott Fitzpatrick in the chat, if a top-tier fest doesn't have a fee, though, they get a prohibitive amount of submissions to review. Needs to be some kind of barrier, or the onslaught that you would otherwise get is incredible. And absolutely. This is another one of the catch-22s, just in the way of, well, can we afford to pay filmmakers if we're barely paying our staff appropriately? Can we afford to have free submissions if we're going to get all of our staff are going to be, bludgeoned with the number of submissions? Especially film programmers are the other most exploited population at film festivals. They're all contract, often all contract, a lot of them are contract staff. A lot of them are getting paid, let's say, $3,000 to watch 150 films and spend how many hours doing that? What's your rate per hour? Probably $3 per hour by the time you're said and done. Okay, so it's totally, there's a lot to be waded through here. And especially if they use something like Film Freeway. That's why Media City stuck with DVD or USB, yes. Scott Miller-Barry, more than one Film Fest organizer has shared, including one in so-called Canada, that they use Film Freeway as an income stream only. Total grifters. You are absolutely right. And yeah, once again, I think maybe Leslie does have this right, that there is an argument to be made for transparency. And that's something that I think should be made more transparent in submission processes is if we don't like the film, we're not going to watch the whole film. Okay, we're going to keep our submission fees low. I'm not, but we're going to reserve the right that if we don't like the first 15 minutes of your feature film, we're not going to spend the time watching the whole thing. I think that's totally fair. There's these psychopaths out there, kind of like simps for their own exploitation, who will say things like, "Oh, well, I would never ask for a fee waiver. It takes a lot of work to watch movies." And I'm like, okay, fair enough. But then we'll also make the argument that, but like if I'm going to pay a submission fee, I expect to get some feedback on my film at least. I'm like, what? like a thousand feedback emails? Nuts. Anyways, there has to. I think Leslie, you're right. It's about transparency. Hopefully, is one way to try to mitigate this issue. Yes, 100% transparency about what an entry fee actually buys, and that's why it's important. I think for more film festivals should have policy outlined clearly on their website. That's submission fee and process policy, artist fee payment policy. What is if I get selected in this film festival, will I be getting a screening fee? I literally had a film at Vancouver International Film Festival in 2019. I asked from the day I was selected until when I was at the festival in person, will I be getting an artist fee? Oh, we don't. It's just such chaos. We don't know. But I'm sure you'll get something. We're sure you'll get something. After the festival, ghosted. Okay, they've changed since then. We'll get into that. But anyways, okay, I've got to get back to my actual point here. How are we doing for time? Probably running way over. Whatever. You're stuck with me, people. Film Freeway's ease of use and lack of oversight has made it really easy for scam festivals and criminals to create fake festivals or even impersonate real festivals on the platform for profit. Okay, in a 2022 article for Films in Frame by Flavia Dima, an excellent article, check it out, details 3 Romanian film festivals that had their identities stolen by fraudsters who created false profiles on Film Freeway, ripping off filmmakers. Okay, one of these fake Film Freeway festivals was able to attract over 5,000 submissions before they were shut down at about $30. Some of them were free, some of them were $30. You know, we don't really know, but I mean, if it was the full $30 for 5,000 submissions, that's 150 grand. Okay, according to the article, which it probably wasn't that, but anyways, whatever. According to the article, in some cases it took months for festivals to get Film Freeway to shut down these fraudulent accounts, and Film Freeway refunded film submitters, but only with credit. Okay, so Film Freeway took all this cash from all these submitters, realized it was a scam. Some of it might have been paid out to the fraudsters. Some of it was almost for sure still in the coin purse of Film Freeway, and Film Freeway was just like, okay, well, here's a $15 or $30 credit for your next submission. They didn't actually return the cash, which I find really, I mean, maybe there's a rational real reason for this, but it does seem pretty weird and gross, to be honest. In one case, the article states Film Freeway also misrepresented how many fraudulent submissions were made. One of these festivals, because the people that created the account actually used hacked one of their staff emails to create the account in the first place, they were actually able to get that account back, and they realized, no, there was actually twice as many submissions paid for than Film Freeway told us. Okay, so some pretty avoidative tactics from Film Freeway. And remember, once again, in an industrial complex, these organizations start to watch out for number one, for their own financial well-being. And Film Freeway was created because the world needed an alternative to film without a box, and it's such a great platform. It's so easy, so user-intuitive. But when the cookie starts to crumble, these for-profit companies are going to watch out for themselves. Okay, Film Freeway scams. Aside from this, identity theft, the more common scam on Film Freeway is simply a film festival that runs a submission fee process and then never actually hosts their event. Okay, to my knowledge, there has been historically no independent verification process by Film Freeway to verify its festivals are genuine. Certainly nothing that they have ever said publicly that indicates this. And there's been, numerous examples of filmmakers going to attend a festival that their film was supposed to screen at and going to the venue, and there is no festival. Okay. However, I will say, to Film Freeway's minor credit, that in 2013, as part of my role as a board of directors on the Young Rural Invermere Film Festival in rural BC, we did run into Film Freeway verification issues. They were adamant we had to add photos of the event before they would allow us to actually make the event live on Film Freeway. We had to jump through a number of assorted hoops to show that we were a legitimate festival. So I do think that some of these calls and articles and publicity has maybe made them start taking this issue a little bit more seriously, including a petition on change.org right now to ban fake film festivals on Film Freeway. Okay, so bring us back to what the film festival industrial complex. We've seen accelerated proliferation, a huge growth in festivals. We've seen exploitation of filmmakers, of staff, right? So this is something that I think is pretty well known. An abandonment of guiding principles. So this is something I want to talk about as well, because obviously most film festivals are started often by film community members, filmmakers, people with noble intentions of supporting filmmakers, exhibiting work that otherwise wouldn't find an audience in their community, and increasingly lately, which is an incredible mission, to increase accessibility and inclusion of marginalized communities in filmmaking stories on screen. So important, given everything that we have kind of gone through as a society for so long. And to the point where now we have even an Inclusion International Film Festival. And what do we see about this festival? Oh, first year running, okay? First year running and $20 submission fees. Okay, we're going to be so inclusive. We're going to charge, in our first year of running a festival, $20 submission fees. Now, I don't know this festival. I'm sure they probably have they're doing it for a good reason or whatever. But this did make me roll my eyes like a cuckoo clock around the back of my head a couple of times, because I think, in my opinion, submission fees in their most base way are the antithesis of inclusion, okay? And it's not only a barrier, like a film programmer, for example, someone who is, in a way, an artist in their own right, curating a selection of films that fits a theme. Maybe your film didn't fit in that theme. Okay, you're not in the festival. Too bad, so sad. But it's a financial barrier, okay? And who is a financial barrier going to hit most? You know, a financial barrier is going to hit low-income, marginalized communities the hardest and prohibit their work from being screened. In an era where film festivals are tripping over themselves to position as inclusive and diverse, nearly all of these festivals support a model that requires filmmakers to pay to play, essentially, okay, to have the chance to play. I argue that submission fees and their strange and silent ubiquitousness across the entire film festival sector are literal class warfare against low-income marginalized communities of filmmakers, student filmmakers. Ultimately, this results in the stories and visions of lower-class filmmakers, filmmakers of color, international filmmakers, will remain less widely exhibited. Okay, so if your festival truly wants to be inclusive, at least lower or abolish your submission fees. And I understand how difficult that is for a lot of festivals. Don't get me wrong. Once you get high on your own supply, it's very hard to cut it back, right? Especially once that becomes a really important part of your revenues. So, you know, I'm not saying, I mean, I'm making the argument to abolish submission fees 100%, but I will also acknowledge that working towards making more affordable, offering fee waivers, whether it's for certain demographics or just anyone that emails. That was something we did at the festival that shall not be named. For many years, any filmmaker that asked for a waiver, we just provided it without asking questions. Ended up getting a lot of fee waiver requests from Iran. Anyways, a lot, like hundreds. It was kind of wild. Yeah, give a discount codes, whatever you can do helps, okay? And so, you know, once again, there's no size fit all. We're all dealing with different macro situations, you know, depending on the public funding available, especially where we are located. And so, you know, this is part of the ongoing dialogue. And also recognizing we're all living under neoliberal capitalism. If we can't pay the bills, if we can't pay the venue rentals, if we can't pay for these festivals, they will cease to exist, and that's not necessarily the best option either. Not always the worst option, actually. Probably more festivals should just die off and new ones take their place, but I'll take that as an aside. Mike in the chat here, submission fees ensure that the relationship between a festival and filmmakers, nearly all of whom are turned down, is exploitation. Why are there more film fests? Because artists pay for them. 100%. This is the argument I'm making throughout this entire talk, is that this sets up this system of hierarchy. It sets up this system of exploitation that has only been growing and growing and proliferating and proliferating. Okay, so finally getting to screening fees, okay? What's a screening fee, people in the room? Getting paid, also known as artist fees. Also known as artist fees. It's basically some kind of form of payment for the labor of creating and exhibiting this film. Most film festivals charge, you know, an admission to their screening. So, you know, some people argue that, well, there should be a percentage of those admissions should go to filmmakers. One programmer, film person, Sean Farnell, had been in the past, and still is, very vocal that he thinks about 30% of all revenues, box office revenues, should be mandated to pay back to artists. Other people are more interested in having kind of a minimum fee schedule, which we're going to talk about here. But one of the first examples to talk about screening fees is the incredible letter from Hollis Rampton to the MoMA. The MoMA was requesting that he screen his films with them, not for any monetary consideration. This is at the MoMA in New York, okay, but for love and honor. Okay, so this has been called the love and honor things, and let's take a read. I'll put it to you as a problem in fairness. I have made, let us say, so-and-so many films. That means so-and-so many thousands of feet of raw stock have been expended, for which I paid the manufacturer. The processing lab was paid by me to develop the stuff after it was exposed in the camera, for which I paid. The lens grinders got paid. Then I edited the footage on rewinds and a splicer, for which I paid. Incorporating leader and glue, for which I also paid. The printing lab and the track lab were paid for their materials and services. You yourself, however meagerly, are being paid to try to persuade me to show my work to the paying public for love and honor. If it comes off, the projectionist will get paid, the guard at the door will be paid, somebody or other paid for the paper on which the letter to me was written and for the postage to forward it. That means that I, in my singular person, by making this work, have already generated wealth for scores of people. Multiply that by as many other working artists as you can think of. Ask yourself whether my lab, for instance, would print my work for love and honor. If I asked them and they took my question seriously, I should expect to have it explained to me ever so gently that human beings expect compensation for their work. The reason is simply that it enables them to continue doing what they do. But it seems that while all these others are to be paid for their part in the show that could not have taken place without me, nonetheless, I, the artist, am not to be paid. Okay? Wow. Hollis Frampton's awesome. Okay. Amazing films. What a smarty pants. Anyways, a great article to kind of base this argument that has been a starting point for a conversation on screening fees. In the economy of the film festival, I'll argue, like Frampton, that filmmaking is a work. Filmmakers are part of the working class, and that screening fees are wages, okay, for that work. In the historical labor movement, the fight for minimum wages was one of the greatest battles and wins for the working class in history. For this reason, the fight for minimum screening fees in Canada has been perhaps the most talked about and publicized of fights against exploitation of media artists. Okay, so this is really, screening fees is really what a lot of the conversation has been focused around. The reason I started with submission fees is because that's what's not talked about. It's the kind of the elephant in the room, so to speak. But screening fees are super important. And through class solidarity, planning, cooperation, advocacy between artists and arts workers, Canada is actually 100% leading the world in the fight for minimum artist fees. We see this through the fact that it has become increasingly common that film festivals in Canada offer minimum artist fees to all filmmakers, something that rarely happens outside of Canada, okay? And, back in the day, I used to think, well, in Europe, they probably everyone probably gets like, $1,000 to screen their short film, right? Or even I knew people that toured in Europe music, and they're like, oh, in Germany we get a meal, we get paid, we get a lodging, it's incredible. Not the case, actually, surprisingly or not. The film festivals in Europe are only kind of starting to catch on. One of the festivals that I forgot to include in this is actually EMAF recently started paying honorariums or fees, minimum fees to their filmmakers, but it's really not the case, and it's certainly not the case in the United States, in the penthouse of capitalism. But for whatever reason, there's some very good reasons that in Canada that this has become more commonplace, and it's in large part the progress of payment of artist fees has been advanced by two Canadian organizations. CARFAC has the minimum recommended fee schedule, more used for kind of like visual artists, art installations, galleries, okay? And then the Independent Media Arts Organization, or IMA for short, with all of their various elements of advocacy work, tons of stuff going on at IMA. I was on the board of IMA for a while, but they publish an annual fee schedule, okay? And this is what most filmmakers, media artists, and media arts exhibitors, so film festivals, will use to determine their fees for paying filmmakers. And this whole schedule just recently got revamped incredibly. Okay, so check it out. It's IMA 2022 to 24 fee schedule. If you just Google, or there's a link here obviously, but if you look up 2022 fee schedule, you can find this schedule that's been vastly improved and expanded upon previous years. Now there is the minimum fee, so consider that like the $15 minimum wage, or whatever minimum wage is in your province or territory. And then there's recommended. Okay, so that's more of like, let's consider that a living wage. Okay, like Living Wage Canada publishes. Okay, and so these is based on the annual operating budget of the organization. So smaller organizations pay slightly lower fees than bigger organizations pay slightly larger fees, and it's based on the duration of the film. Now there's also package rates if you're in to try to promote the screening of short films. There is package rates for short films. There's other specifiers within this fee schedule. But this is the basis of how this works. And this is what Canada Council says to film festivals and exhibitors that it funds that they have to pay, at a minimum, they have to pay this to be eligible for funding from the Canada Council. Now, they do not enforce that at all, okay? And so that's one of the big kind of pet peeves, is that, yes, that is their policy, but they do not enforce that at all. And so the only way it's enforced is if the people on the jury end up knowing that a specific film festival is not paying fees, and they reject that festival. Basically, the peer jury process rejects that festival. It's a bad process, okay? It's something we've talked about Canada Council with. They say they do not have the resources to be able to enforce this actual policy, but that is the policy, okay? So kind of this toothless policy, still nonetheless a good policy, because a lot of organizations follow this fee schedule and pay filmmakers, likely because of this. New in the 2024 fee schedule as well as minimum and recommended fees. There's fees for online, live stream, and on-demand screenings for the first time. Okay, so for digital presentations of media artwork, fees for media art installed exhibits, solo and group shows, fees for artist talks, Q&As, and panel discussions. If you're asked to come up on stage after a film screening, it's IMA's argument that you should be paid some sort of honorarium for doing that. If you're asked to take place in a panel discussion or a film or like a talk like I'm doing, you should be compensated for that, okay? And educational use as well, which I think is really the next battleground, okay? We won't get into that too much, but maybe it's because I'm starting to work in a post-secondary institution now, and I realize how, I think a lot of academic institutions simply aren't paying for the work they're showing in classrooms. Screening fees, a number of major, this is some of the positive news, okay? There has been some major victories, as exploitative as this whole pyramid is still, there has been some really incredible victories for this conversation stepping forward in recent years in Canada, but even in the USA, and like I talked about in Europe as well. Ann Arbor Film Festival, as we talked about, the oldest experimental film festival in North America, makes a commitment. You can see the letter from Leslie referencing the Hollis Frampton letter to start paying honorariums to all filmmakers in 2020. This is exceedingly rare, especially for a major US festival, okay? A lot of the festivals that are offering honorariums are student-run festivals. Just like in Canada, the ones that are like kind of the most ethical are often some of the smallest. So for Ann Arbor Film Festival to make this pledge is actually a huge win, I think, for artists, especially in the United States. Vancouver International Film Festival, of course the year after I play there, maybe it's because I harass them so much, I doubt it. But anyway, starts paying minimum artist fees sometime in 2020 or 2021. This is for sure for Canadian filmmakers. It's unclear from my research whether this includes international filmmakers, but this is also a huge win. This is one of the biggest film festivals in Canada, right? I think second biggest maybe, or third biggest. I'm not sure if it's bigger than Hot Docs. Anyways, a huge win for artists. Still, the policy is very unclear. If I was this huge film festival and I was starting to pay artist fees, that would be like, I would be blasting that out, and every social media channel would be like, we have taken the pledge, and filmmakers would rejoice. People would be like, this is part of the reason you want to pay artists, is because it's an amazing ethical thing in a time where everyone's looking for this kind of like ethical capital. Why not be proud about this? Why not brag about this? I don't really understand. Hot Docs as well. This is in 22, 1 year ago. Who Are Festivals For? Hosted a Who Are Festivals For panel discussion, largely revolving around the payment of artist fees and exploitation of filmmakers by film festivals. Hot Docs screening fee policy remains unclear, although it seems filmmakers are now generally being paid minimum fees, which is great if that's the case. Once again, kind of these transparency, right? As Leslie was talking about from Ann Arbor, is key. You can't. No one, even the filmmakers screening at these festivals half the time don't know if it's a universal screening fee policy. Am I just getting this? Are international filmmakers getting this? There's just these big festivals become a black box. Host Eli Horwath also publishes an article and a filmmaker interview by the same title that year as well. But however, exploitation persists, and we're back to boo the Toronto International Film Festival. Feel free to boo in the chat if you like. Not to take the piss out of, I'm sure there's tons of great people working at TIFF, but it's pretty flagrant. The fact that this is basically, VIF has changed, Hot Docs has changed, TIFF is being a holdout on essentially refusing to pay screening fees. So let's look at the revenue from 2020 or 2021. Okay, so $30 million of revenue, okay, and government funding that year, almost $13 million. Now this is a far cry, actually, this is still a pandemic year. Pre-pandemic, they were hovering around for many years, $47 million per year of revenues. However, what we've seen during the pandemic is their government funding has ballooned incredibly. Okay, pre-pandemic, they're getting maybe $4 million from government sources. This is a 200% increase, like basically tripling their government funding during the pandemic. Now, I don't want to be the person who's like, oh, my tax dollars at work or whatever, but it is incredible to see that amount of public funds going towards an organization that just refuses to pay a living basic minimum wage to their filmmakers. Okay, and it gets kind of worse, honestly. When you look at their total expenses, you can't really tell anything from these generic categories. What you can see is their bottom line. Okay, $27 million. Wait, but they have $29 million income. Oh, right. So they had a net surplus for 2021 of $2.145 million. They could have paid all of their filmmakers 10 times the minimum screening fees if they had wanted to with this surplus. Okay, and once again, it's been a challenging year for TIFF, or a number of years for TIFF and a lot of major film festivals, seeing their revenues dry up, laying people off, doing stuff online, a huge shakeup. But this is an obscene amount of money. To be able to say that you can't afford to pay filmmakers, it's bullshit, okay? It's complete bullshit. Screening fees paid to filmmakers, $0 that we know of. Maybe they are paying some filmmakers, but generally their policy, as we understand it, is they don't pay anyone. They don't even pay the most expensive, high-profile films to screen at the festival from anything that I've been able to get out of this kind of black hole of their administration. They said I would be paid in exposure. In Winnipeg, we have a saying that artists in Winnipeg die from exposure. Okay, and that's what TIFF is doing. They're paying people in exposure. Okay, they're also offering honorariums to attend the festival. So, here's $500. Come and attend the festival. Pay $2,000 to come attend the festival. So once again, if you have resources, if you are middle class or have a stable job, income, you're not a single mother, you can go to TIFF. You can get $500, you can pay $1,500, maybe apply to travel funding and attend this festival, meet people. If you don't have that kind of cash, or if you're living with instability, you can't afford to make the most of this. And that's why these huge festivals that are claiming to be inclusive, when this is their base level of operation, it's complete bullshit, in my opinion. It doesn't negate a lot of the amazing programs they are coming out with, certainly, but at a core level, it is pretty gross. And so here's compensation, $14.5 million for compensation of their various staff, 152 full-time employees, 420 part-time employees, and consulting fees of over $500,000. And this is where it's super fun. I always love looking at this. Top 10 compensated full-time positions. 4 people making $100,000 to $160,000. 3 people making $160,000 to $200,000. 1 person making $250,000 to $300,000, and 2 glorious people at the top of this disgusting, opulent pyramid making over $350,000 salaries, while all of the filmmakers associated with this festival are not paid a dime in terms of an artist fee. And this is why my argument has always been, it's not can they afford it or can we afford it as a festival, it's do we want to prioritize it. If you have $30 million, you have ways of moving money around, spending money on certain things. The TIFF has made it a priority to not pay filmmakers. TIFF has made it a priority for free drinks. Okay? I don't know what their free drink budget is, but I would love to know. I would love, if someone's in the annals, the financial annals of TIFF, please let me know how much money is spent on free drinks every year or hosting lavish industry parties. Okay, these are the priorities of big festivals. My argument would be that you have more to gain as a Toronto International Film Festival by paying artist fees and being proud about paying artist fees, you would probably see an influx of donations, an influx of community support that could rejuvenate this film festival in major ways, okay? Than some industry party where people are drinking Budweiser or Heineken or whatever the hell is your alcohol sponsor for the year. Once again, TIFF also offering minimal travel support, prefers to offer minimal travel support that realistically covers a small fraction of the cost of attending to filmmakers instead of actual paying artist fees. They think of artist fees, I think a lot of these kind of like corporate managers think of artist fees as just wasted money, whereas, well, if we bring people into the festival, then that creates, it enhances our event, right? Which is, once again, there's arguments that I think I've made that negate this. And embracing neoliberal austerity even with a surplus. Okay, so, and I realize I'm going a little bit over time here, so we're going to blast through this a little bit. So what happens when the festival has a surplus? In my experience at festivals that shall not be named, this money just goes into the bank and has disappeared. It's a rainy day fund, or even better, it goes into an endowment fund and is invested into the stock market. Yippee! So often by the time festivals know they have a surplus, it's too late to better compensate filmmakers or staff, or how do you go about that, especially in these bigger festivals or even in a smaller one. You offer bonuses, but how do you do that equitably? It becomes easier to just put that money in the bank. And for me, as a festival, when I was a festival director, it was the most debilitatingly depressing thing. I would get, you raise all this money, I would not know if we're gonna break even all year. We'd do the festival. After the festival, we would finally be able to do the accounting required to see, okay, we have marginal or even a significant surplus, and that money was just taken away from me. And they said, okay, now you're starting from $0 again. Good luck. Have a great year. We'll talk to you at the next board meeting, right? And so what I've seen is often festivals will put this surplus in the bank. Some may be earmarked for the following year's programming. I would, of course, always try to argue or advocate for this. Capital expenses or putting into the future year's budget is a very hard sell in some of the roles I was in. But a lot of festivals will put any surpluses into their endowment. An endowment, what is an endowment? It's basically a fund of money controlled by an external organization, sometimes controlled by the festival, but often controlled, for smaller festivals, controlled by a not-for-profit foundation, where the investment income, so the money is invested in the stock market or property potentially, and the income is then given to the festival for their charitable purpose. Okay, so often organizations will start with an endowment in collaboration with the foundation. The film festival will hand over the large sum of money to that foundation. At that point, the film festival loses access to that money. That's no longer their money, it's the foundation's money. They can't take that money back if they have a fiscal emergency. Okay, all they're going to get back is usually the goal is to return at least 5% annual return to that festival on that money per year. So at that rate, it'll take 15 to 20 years for that festival just to get their money back. Okay, and I'm not saying that that this is an endowment is a terrible idea for all festivals, but I do think that sometimes it's maybe not the cash cow that people think it is. And ultimately, you're literally investing money in the stock market. You're literally taking charitable funding, arts funding, and putting it into the stock market and completely losing control of that money as well. Okay, so who's making these decisions? I love this postcard. It gives me much solace to look at this postcard from time to time. Sorry for the low res. I should have scanned it higher, obviously. Anyways, oh well. The board of directors ultimately is responsible. Here's the TIFF board of directors. Boo! Jeffrey, let's look at these people. Chairman and CEO of Universal Music Canada, wealthy philanthropist, chair of RIV Capital, acquisition and investment firm, and former executive of legal and business affairs at Blue Ant Media. Here we go. RBC, literal sponsor on the board. Here is the one filmmaker. I want to hang out. I want to hear what this what Denis. I'm not sure the pronunciation of their name, but I would love to hear what they have to say. Former programmer for TIFF too, so arguably part of that machine. Chairman and founder of Kingsdale Advisor, a corporate advisor on shareholder and governance relations. Jesus. Boston Consulting Group. A consultant in gender dynamics, a corporate director, philanthropist, and former senior vice president of Potash Corp, now Nutrien. Shout out to my Saskatchewan buddies. They know Nutrien, one of the largest potash mining corporations, or the largest potash mining corporation in the world. A massive, massive corporation. Alan's my homeboy. I have to pull this up because I thought this was awesome. He's basically like a tech entrepreneur, but his self-described in his bio as a visionary serial entrepreneur and a leader in Canada's tech community. I want to hang out with Alan. I'll hang out with Alan. Okay. Senior Vice President of Bell Mobility, the literal top sponsor of TIFF, is sitting on the board. Tell me how this is not a conflict of interest. Explain that to me, please, for the love of God. This should be illegal for a charity to have a sponsor like that sitting on their board. It's bananas. Professional not-for-profit board member. Once again, here, like I have questions around conflict of interest. This is the co-founder and co-president of Elevation Pictures, arguably the largest distributor in Canada right now, and formerly executive vice president of Entertainment One that has folded but was also the largest distributor. This person is sitting on the board and also submitting, is the co-president and co-founder of two, or like high up at two different distribution companies that are constantly screening work at TIFF. I do wonder about the ethics of that. Anchorage Capital Group. So down here we got the stock investor bros, Anchorage Capital Group, this guy working at GMP Securities and Gordon Capital Inc., proudly saying that he co-founded the mining finance team at GMP, which funded well over $10 billion of Canadian and international mining companies. And this is one of my favorites too, a human resources person, dedicated to, and I quote, helping clients make the most of their human capital. Oof. Okay, so how did this happen? How did these leagues of administrators and lawyers and stock market investors and all of these people take over our most important and valued arts organizations? These organizations were started by artists, but now they're being run by lawyers and accountants and HR specialists and stock market investors and corporate sponsors, literal corporate sponsors sitting on the boards telling the director, the programming director, how to do their work. Mike Holboom, he's in the chat, writes about this in a recent article, Rotterdam and the Accountant Revolution. IF Rotterdam, literally one of the most memorable and impactful film festival experience of my personal career, was the subject of turmoil and the firing of their entire programming team in 2021. Okay, so I went there in 2019. It was an incredible festival. I'm sure it still is in its way. But they basically had a coup of the managerial class at this festival. Mike details it very clearly in this incredible article he wrote. And what do you do? A similar experience happened at Sheffield Dockfest, another amazing festival experience I had around the same time. Its entire artistic programming team was ousted by corporate-minded management in 2021. And before that, the artistic director, a year or two before that, also left on bad terms, being very publicly saying that, why they were leaving. And this playbook is becoming all too common, especially at larger festivals, especially during COVID, when budget shortfalls were made to validate neoliberal austerity, an easy way for accountants and management to out pesky programmers that unbelievably cared more about films than finance. The nerve! The fact that these actions took place during COVID and through austerity measures manufactured by management are really reminiscent of disaster capitalism playbook made famous by Naomi Klein's shock doctrine. Okay? Literally, both of these film festivals used the emergency of COVID to oust their entire creative teams. Okay? Was that necessary? Really? Or was that just an opportunistic move by people that wanted more power and control for themselves? And I find also the people that are really corporate and finance management, they hate filmmakers. They hate artists. I don't know what it is. It's fucked up. But these people really resent artists. I don't know if it's because we're doing what we love or something. I don't really understand, or they just think they know better than us. They think, oh, these filmmakers think they're so smart, I'll show them. I don't know what Machiavellian things are running through their brains, but there is really such a resentment for actual artists. I've seen it in organizations in Winnipeg, across the nation, across the world, and I really don't understand. Maybe I need to delve into the psychology a little bit more. I'm sure someone can maybe get into that. But how to resist? Okay, so we're rounding out the talk now, and we're just going to talk about a couple of things that we can kind of do. So, increase solidarity among the film festival's working class. Okay, the festival workers and the filmmakers we really need to breed more solidarity between these two kind of disparate groups. Often, these systems of hierarchy, they like to keep us fighting amongst ourselves. Okay, and we see that with filmmakers being pissed at gatekeepers, right? Programmers, ultimately also the most exploited part of this whole pyramid, okay? And they're not listed down here, they're listed a little bit higher up, but really festival workers, staff, film programmers, and filmmakers are all part of the working class of the film festival system. We need to start advocating for one another and working together to talk about these issues, to bring these issues to the forefront, to find better ways. And like I said, there's no one way, so it is a lot of work for each individual festival and organization to kind of wade through how they can make progress on these issues, okay? Solidarity between filmmakers and film programmers, we talked about that. Audiences are also very important to get on our side, as they are usually shocked to find out their admissions don't at all go to filmmakers. I would love to know what percentage of film festival audiences at Toronto International Film Festival, boo, know that filmmakers aren't paid a penny from their $30 admission ticket. Okay, $30 for a seat in that theater, zero, not a penny of that going to filmmakers. I think audiences would be enraged. And that's why we talk about talking about these issues whenever possible. Okay, so just talking about these issues is what can bring about kind of this, think about it as class consciousness. We're coming from a Marxist perspective, sure. So let's talk about, talking about these issues as bringing about class consciousness in this kind of microcosm of the film festival sector. Once these issues start to be discussed, it is like Pandora's box. The clear inequity simply can't be bottled back up again. And because of talking about this, we've seen festivals change their ways. This is why festivals like Hot Docs, VIFF, EMAF, Ann Arbor Film Festival have decided to try to go down this road of figuring out how they can become more ethical in their systems of operation, systems of hierarchy. So this is what I encourage everyone to do. If you're a filmmaker, you're listening, your film is selected for a screening, you're not paid for your work for that screening, but you decide, this is a good opportunity for me. I want to go to International Film Festival Rotterdam, or I want to go to Toronto International Film Festival, or I want to go wherever. Even though I'm not getting paid for my work. Well, take a moment during that Q&A when you're there in person, grab that mic and say, I just want to take this moment and thank all of the filmmakers for contributing their work to this festival without compensation. It's an incredible amount of work to make films, and I just want to acknowledge that the filmmakers are not being compensated here for their work today. And drop that mic on the floor and watch the incredible, lively conversation that ensues. Because this is one of the ways that we've been working, myself and filmmaker allies, to try to get this conversation started at festivals and get festivals to actually hear this, okay? It's one of the only times as a filmmaker you really have a platform, beyond, posting your bitchy comments like I do and tagging the festival on Facebook or whatever, right? This gets filmmakers, film festival staff, and audiences talking together too, okay? Audiences especially, they don't realize this, okay? God, I hope we get into TIFF one day, especially after this talk. I would never will. But hey, I dare them. Come on, let me come and make this speech at your festival. Come on, it'll be fun. It's not that serious. It's just a good time. Resist the profit economy. Okay, so the profit economy, number one in our list of kind of what signifies an industrial complex. So charitable not-for-profits do not always need to act with profits as their number one concern. People are incensed to even hear this comment a lot of the time. Well, what do you mean that, we couldn't even exist if we couldn't blah, 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 blah. It's like, yes, we all have to exist within capitalism. Does everything I do in my personal life just have profit as a number one indicator? No, okay? No, not at all. But as arts workers, we must fight to remember the charitable goals of our festivals and make those foremost in our daily operations over dollars. Okay, so that's once again I think number 2 was like losing these altruistic ideals. So trying to keep a grasp on why are these organizations, why did we get into filmmaking in the first place? Why did we get into running a film festival in the first place? How can we center those goals in the forefront at our organizations over money? And I get it. It's tough. I ran a film festival for 5 years. I totally burnt out. It took me years, honestly, to recover from that. The burnout is real. The stress, the anxiety over finances is real. But we really do have to try to push back against that being the number one motivator. So here's some ways. Keep sponsors off your board of directors, for Christ's sake. That's just nuts to me that is even legal. It should be illegal in Canada to have a corporate sponsor on your board of directors telling staff, being ultimately the employer for your executive director. Keep programming decisions removed from financial, sponsorship, and other external influences. I can't tell you how many times during my years of running a film festival that shall not be named, the time when a sponsor wanted, or like a government representative was like, oh, you have to play this film, or there's always, or even just members of the public, someone from the community being like, oh, you have to play this film. This is my cousin's film. They're from Winnipeg, or they're from this community. You have to play this film. It's like, no, we don't. You really need to keep programming, however your programming is structured, whether it's just programmers or programming committee, you need to keep it separate and removed from these external influences, especially financial influences. I encourage clear management and broad term limit and board term limits. Okay, so executive directors should have a term limit. I'm not going to say what that is. It's up to your organization to decide. Even lead programmers should have a term limit. Board members most absolutely need to have a term limit. Okay, I've seen boards with the same chair of the board for the entire existence. I don't think that is a healthy thing. This is my opinion. Once again, I do not think that is a healthy thing. We need to have rational and reasonable term limits and a system that follows that. Beware of valuing growth as a symbol for success. Okay, a bigger film festival isn't always better. A bunch, even more audiences isn't always a better thing. Instead, let's value experience, community feedback, and true artistic innovation at our festivals. Okay, adopt less hierarchical structures. Doxa Documentary Film Festival, one of the most righteous film festivals in Canada, is one festival that has adopted a horizontal management structure. It's been working out great for them. Of course, there's growing pains in trying any kind of new structural setup, but I think there is something to be said for trying to break down this hierarchy that a lot of these festivals operate in, where the person at the top makes an obscene amount of money and everyone else is getting paid barely enough to survive. Especially as the cost of living is increasing. Doxa is also one of the few festivals I know in Canada that refuses to have a major sponsor that is a major bank, a major Canadian bank, who are all hand over fist funding fossil fuel extraction, the harassment of land defenders, and also refuses to work with big banks. And I don't know, is there anyone? Anyways, big banks for sure. Anyways, which is a super righteous and interesting thing, I think, for festivals to think a little bit more about who they're partnering with and whether that actually aligns with their kind of core goals and mission. If you work with a festival that is getting Canada Council funding and not paying IMA fees, report it to Canada Council. They're not going to do anything, but it doesn't hurt, okay? And it might at some point result in maybe they'll email them. Maybe the Canada Council will email and say, we have a report on this. It's worth reporting, okay? I've reported TIFF. Oh God, I'm gonna get a cease and desist from these people. I don't have that many lawyers on my personal board either. So, anyways, you can report people at feedback at Canada Council if you feel like that is a valid thing to do. Support the righteous fests. Support, volunteer for, give accolades to festivals that are righteous. It is not easy running a film festival, and running an ethical film festival can be even more work than running an exploitative one, okay? So try to give credit where credit is due. Try to support. If you have the opportunity to premiere your brand new film, and this is especially for more experienced filmmakers, who I find do less than anyone in terms of advancing this conversation. The more experience a filmmaker get, the more ins and connections they get with these high-fluting festivals, the less they want to talk about this stuff. We need you experienced filmmakers. We need, the Denis Cotes. We need the Penny Lanes. We need the level filmmakers that are screening everywhere to start talking about this. Even if all it is thanking, like I talked about at the Q&A, thanking the filmmakers in the festival for exhibiting their work without compensation. It's an easy thing to do, and as more notable filmmakers, you hold a lot more power in this kind of power dynamic. We need you to speak out. And so that's one way that we can do is by supporting righteous festivals and choosing to screen our work first or premiere at festivals that we believe are righteous festivals over those that we believe are exploitative. Here's a few ways you can do it. Prioritize screening work at righteous festivals. Talk highly in the community. Leave them a positive review online or film free. And donate to them if you can. I know a number of filmmakers who have just donated their screening fees back to a festival in a year when they didn't need that money. They're doing well. They have a full-time job. They donated their screening fees back to a festival because they believed in that festival. And it's something that I think, especially as people's financial stability becomes maybe in a better place to consider doing if you are able to do so. And don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to stand up for yourself and the value of your work. Okay, as long as you are polite and measured and fair when you stand up for yourself, the festival will actually respect you more, I believe, and likely remember you more too. This is just my opinion. I realize not everyone and also acknowledge that not everyone is in the mental headspace all the time to take on this kind of dialogue, to take on this labor. It is labor to try to advance this conversation, and that's fine too. You don't have to feel like every festival you go to, you have to do all this stuff. You have to speak up when you feel like you have the capacity to consider it. And finally, just get involved. Start a festival. Join a film festival. We need more artists. We need more young people. We need more marginalized voices involved in running film festivals and getting involved in places like Leslie's talking about Film Festival Alliance. I will check it out, Leslie, as well as Independent Media Arts Alliance. These organizations that really are a hub for advancing these conversations. That's it. Oh, okay. Any other questions or anything that we want to talk about? I realize I blabbed on for so long. I hope it was informative and enlightening for everyone. Any questions in the room or any thoughts? Thank you. Yeah, right up here.
Hey, all right. Well, thanks very much, Aaron. That was super interesting and provocative and all of that stuff. I can sort of see you now.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that it's important to critique the festivals and the festival sort of structure that you're talking about here.
Yeah.
So I'm not presenting a defense of that.
For sure.
But I do want to ask about sort of the value of thinking about festivals all as one group, because there's clearly some kinds of festivals that are catering more to artists that don't have a source of income, experimental filmmakers, or people who are sort of working in more marginal ways. Whereas I expect that the people who are presenting their films at TIFF, not all of them, but a lot of the films, are already getting paid for that work, right? Yeah. So I guess that's sort of one.
Totally. I think that's a total, and just for the people online, we're just talking about, if you can hear, just kind of like the different types of film festivals. And I think you're totally right. There's artist-run kind of center film festivals that are presenting experimental work or independent work. And there's a whole other kind of category of kind of like almost like industry festivals that is basically being attended to by people where the production companies are paying for them to attend. They're paying them a per diem. They're paying for their hotel. At a lot of big festivals, major motion pictures are obviously, they have huge distribution resources.
So I think that people who are screening at Lakeland should get a fee. Yeah. Because that's in keeping with the scale of their contribution and the kinds of festivals that experimental filmmakers contribute to. But I think it is not smart use of TIF dollars to pay the producers of their gala film presentations an artist the standard art fee you're already getting paid for that labor somewhere else, right?
For sure, yeah, I think that's a good point. And that's why, like, I really do try to hammer home that, and I'm a fee schedule. That's not, I mean, yes, certain funders like Canada Council is, saying they require that, even though they don't really. But what I've tried to do, even in my role at IMA, is to say that this isn't the word of God. These fees are not what everyone has to pay, and then all of a sudden we're living in a utopia. Every film festival needs to figure out what's right for itself. For example, I've had some friends run the San Diego Underground Film Festival. Started it from nothing. Okay, San Diego, very expensive city to be running a film festival. Okay, doing it as a labor of love. Running it off the first couple of years, definitely through submission fees. We had this conversation when we were there and with them, and they started paying honorariums to the selected filmmakers, and they started doing it in a system that worked for them. They took 30% of all of their admissions and divided that up amongst the filmmakers who are presenting as part of the festival. So, like I said, there's no one size fits all. If TIFF decides, oh yeah, we're actually only going to pay Canadian filmmakers and all the short filmmakers, great, awesome. Like, I don't know, that's a place to start. And I think when people look at the IMA fee schedule, often it can seem overwhelming. Often it can seem just financially impossible for organizations, especially organizations that don't have streams of public funding. And so I just encourage those organizations, to start where they can. Maybe that you refund the submission fee to all the filmmakers who are accepted. Like, I don't know. There's things that we can do, and that's kind of what I'm a proponent for, is not, necessarily trying to denigrate, people that are really struggling, to try to figure out how to balance all these different things and staffing costs as well. But to try to work towards figuring out ways for each individual festival that works for them, and trying to improve on that as the years go by, right? Because it's very difficult if you're making 130 grand off of submission fees to just turn that tap off.
Definitely. I mean, the final thing that I guess I wanted just to ask you to clarify is the figures that you showed about TIFF, again, sort of not defending TIFF in every way.
Yep.
Those were for the festival or for the group, like for the Bell Lightbox TIFF organization? Because my assumption is that if they make any money off of the festival, it just keeps the lights on for the Bell Lightbox.
Especially in the last couple of years. And that's why you've seen this huge amount of government funding come in, basically, to keep them afloat, I guess.
Right. So, I mean, I guess your assertion here that I ask you to tighten up your claim a little bit, because you know that TIFF is actually investing their profits into an endowment?
I don't know. I'm just saying that that's more of a personal experience that I had running a film festival that shall not be named. And so, but I do know that a lot of film festivals do have endowments, and I'm not saying anything. I don't know if TIFF has an endowment. I wasn't conjecturing that they're putting their surplus from that year. I would expect they wouldn't be, because they probably need that. Now has been a really rough financial time for them. If you go back year to year, there's been years where they posted a $2 million deficit as well. So I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that they can afford to pay, especially short filmmakers, minimum artist fees. They can prioritize their funds in a way that would allow them to do that, and there's no excuse why they can't be doing that.
I think that's a really convincing argument to make. I don't think that TIFF and Bell Lightbox is making off that fees here. I just don't see it.
No, and no film festivals aren't a get rich quick scheme. They are for some people that are making $350,000 a year. That's a hell of a salary by anyone's measure. And whether you want to argue that they're worth that or not, that's not for me to say. That's a lot of money. But more so what I'm after, I'm not saying that TIFF is running away to the bank. I'm sure they're not. But what I do think is that they're the last bastion is refusing to admit how exploitative it is to not pay, especially the short filmmakers. These are emerging filmmakers. And at the same simultaneously tout how inclusive and diverse you are when there's these clear barriers and you're not financially compensating people. So I get it, and I encourage people to kind of push back on some of the. I think part of the talk also, I'm trying to be a little bit controversial or demonstrative, and so I have much sympathy for all of the people working at film festivals. It's an incredibly difficult thing. Like I said, it really burnt me out doing that, especially throughout COVID, And I know so many people. There's been such a turnover at film festivals, so I really don't want to try to denigrate the people doing this really hard work because it is really difficult. But part of the conversation. Anyone else online have any questions as we round out the talk today, or anyone else in person? Any thoughts?
Maybe a question. Everything you talk about is so like I've been really interested in the nonprofit world, and
Yeah.
I feel like that sort of like nonprofit industrial complex sort of deals with a lot of interesting things.
100.
Comment that like there's different ways in which the sort of conferences that we care about art or whatever.
Yeah.
I think that's as a nonprofit.
Yeah.
So, really huge.
Yeah.
That I found that really interesting.
Yeah, so the comment was that a person in attendance here seeing a lot of similarities within kind of the arts sector in general. I'd say 100%. Like I initially was like, should I just call this like the arts sector industrial complex? Because really it is all. I mean, we're dealing with a lot of very specific things to film festivals. But look at musicians. The submission fees that musicians have to pay to try to present their bands at music festivals is exactly the same and maybe even worse. I haven't been in a band for a long time, so back in the day we were using like Sonic bids, which I just googled the other day. It still exists. What a horrifying prospect, trying to submit your music and paying these obscene fees to try to play it at music festivals. So there's a ton of oh yeah, okay. And so the one thing I didn't talk about here actually that everyone can feel free to go check out, and it's so out of date. So that's kind of one of the reasons I didn't talk about it here. Let me just pull it up. I have actually created a website called invertedpyramid.org. It's just so out of date right now, and this is, I guess, really giving me the gas in the tank to try to get this updated again. But this is a place where you can go and check all of these different publicly funded film festivals in Canada, some in the United States, a couple elsewhere, not too many elsewhere, and check out the financials kind of behind them. Okay, so you can. This is just literally information based on Government of Canada CRA charitable tax reports. Okay, so this is publicly available information, and like I said, it's really out of date. I mean, this information is always a year or two out of date because by the time these forms get up online, it's literally 2 years later. But but it's even more out of date. Like the facts that I had for TIFF, I'm maxing out here at 2018 here. Okay, so I need to try to get back into here again, but here we can see short film submissions, fees paid to short filmmakers. Sometimes we don't really know, but this is basically was my work in the past to try to put this information on what festivals are reputable or kind of the financial underpinning of a lot of festivals here. So Calgary International Film Festival, let's check it out, 2018. We don't really know I didn't have any idea whether artists were being paid or not. This submission fees, 2020, I guess, the submission fees. But 28 financials, total revenue, surplus of $7,000. Okay, like generally, especially if but a total budget about $2.2 million. It's a pretty huge budget. The festival that shall not be named, it was about a $400,000 per year budget. That's Manitoba's largest film festival. So it's a big budget, right? But not grossly paid positions. Still a lot of these festivals we don't know who's being paid. A lot of festivals don't want to give out that information. Some festivals will. But anyways, you can check out that site, and I will try to make an effort to do another. If there's anyone out there that knows people that are capable of scraping internet information and automatically filling this website, like, for the love of God, reach out to me, because I've spent so many hours updating this freaking website, and I just it is kind of hard to do. And I know it's not that hard because all this information is on the CRA website, so hypothetically you should be able to just scrape it and input it somehow. I just don't have those skills, and whenever I've talked to someone about the project who claims to have the skills, they drop me like a hot potato. So, if just putting that out there, would be great to have this be more of a sustainable and up-to-date website. Does anyone care to list of ethical festivals? Leslie Raymond is also saying Film Festival Alliance is working toward transparency for Film Fest members. Such a helpful website. Thank you. It takes a lot of work to keep a website research up. Totally. Film Festival Alliance is working on that. So I look forward to seeing that. That's great. Any other questions or thoughts here? I think we should wrap it up. I've gone way the hell over time here. So thank you all for tuning in online. I'm going to leave this stream up, so please feel free to share it. It'll be available at this same link after we stop the broadcast here. You can share it. You can also, just a reminder, that you can download the presentation I made today too as a PDF in the chat on Facebook or on YouTube. There's a Dropbox link in the chat to download the presentation. So thanks everyone. Thank you. And we'll see you next time. Hopefully at TIFF. I'll do this talk at TIFF maybe. Come on, man. It's you know, $30 a seat to see this. We're talking some real money here. Okay, thanks everyone.